in today's trade. Even the bank Nifty quite sluggish. However, important to note, on a week-to-date basis, the Nifty is up around 0.7% at current reckoning, and the mid-caps have outperformed on a week-to-date basis with a gain of around 2.5%. Now, overall, there seems to be a lot of caution again with regards to what's taking place globally. So Asia was largely weak. The US markets were largely mixed. The Nasdaq gained, but the other indices were weak in yesterday's trading session, and that seems to have spilled over to our markets as well. So one of the key points to watch out for is maybe there is caution ahead of that November jobs report from the US, where it is estimated that the US economy is probably going to add around 200,000 jobs for the month of November. This is versus 261,000 jobs in the month of October. Why would this possibly be a positive for the markets if in case it does come in line or even lower than that figure? Is simply because the markets will then understand or reason with the fact that the hikes which have taken place by the Fed, which have been 75 basis points for 4 consecutive times, are then working, and hence the pace of rate hikes could possibly slow down. Remember, this will be the first or the last data point from the US economy when it comes to jobs as well as employment ahead of the Fed meet, which takes place on the 13th of December. Now, remember that we have been speaking to a whole host of experts with regards to all of this data. JP Morgan, for example, Jahangir Aziz told us earlier this morning that yes, there is a step down which has taken place from the Fed, but no, there is no pivot when it comes to the Fed's action. So that is something to realize, that whether or not they are going to change their strategy enough for the markets to consider it a pivot. Now, clarity is also needed on COVID policies coming out of China. So that seems to be a concern which is weighing down on the global markets as well. Separately, back home, a lot of stocks which are in focus. So auto sales have been trickling in the whole of yesterday. For example, Eicher Motors is one of your top loser on the Nifty. The total sales came in at around 70,766 units when it came to Royal Enfield versus a poll of around 73,816. Divi's Labs is in focus because Morgan Stanley initiated with an underweight and a target price of 3053. So that particular stock is in focus and is seeing a bit of a down day. Windfall tax cuts, and that is benefiting in terms of a sentiment positive. A lot of the oil and gas stocks, Reliance, ONGC, Oil India. Apollo Hospitals, in fact, is your top gain on the Nifty this afternoon. So there's a lot of momentum within the entire healthcare space, and that continues to show for select counters. So Apollo Hospitals is your top gain on the Nifty. Hindalco, Tata Steel from the entire metal space is seeing follow-on buying from yesterday's trading session. Remember, a lot of the economy-linked stocks have been in focus. Those stocks continue to see some amount of follow-on buying. Remember, this comes despite sluggishness in the global economy as well. Week-to-date movers, Britannia, Ultratech, Cement, BPCL, all of these stocks have gained over 5% on a week-to-date basis. Paytm, Policy Bazaar are in focus in today's trading session after it assured investors that Paytm assured investors that they are on the path to profitability, and Policy Bazaar, the owner, PB Fintech, has seen a 5% block in terms of shares, likely sold by SoftBank. So that those two stocks are in focus as well. Lastly, the government, like I mentioned, has slashed the windfall levies on oil production by more than half, while the export tax on diesel is trimmed by over 20-odd%. This has boosted a lot of stocks within the entire energy space. MOIL, there's a production update for the month of November, which is boding well for the stock. Westlife Development, where there is an analyst meet which took place, so that stock is reacting to that. Metro Shoes is also reacting to a couple of statements with regards to a management meet takeaway. And just to give you a little bit of Friday flavor, you'd have to say PVR has opened a 3-screen multiplex in Haryana, and they've opened their directors' luxury cut cinema auditoriums in Bangalore as well. Let's see whether there's enough interest when it comes to the box office, but nonetheless, the capex actually continues at this point in time. But we do have a couple of questions. Mihir Nair joins in. He wants to know the outlook for auto stocks for the coming week. Well, Mihir, you know, it is difficult to give a sense in terms of what the auto stocks would do for the coming week. That would be more of a technical standpoint, but more on a fundamental basis, the auto stocks would continue to be in focus. It was largely a mixed picture this time. A little bit of the two-wheeler sales have been a little sluggish, and with regards to, you know, the rate tightening taking place, possibly another rate hike, but the quantum could be less from the Reserve Bank of India. In that context, we could possibly see some amount of demand probably softening for auto companies going forward, and there would be other factors going into next year as well in terms of what the global economy is doing, the semiconductor shortage, and you know, whether or not there would be the commodity softening, which could then possibly play into auto companies, which could probably even cut prices to spur demand. So as of now, the domestic demand story for India separately remains strong, so there's no real trouble which is coming in there, though two-wheeler sales have been a bit sluggish this time round. But nonetheless, overall, there could be maybe some amount of a trickle of a sentiment negative with regards to a higher rate scenario. But overall commodity softening going into next year could be something which could possibly be a tailwind for auto companies. Well, we have a couple of other stocks, a couple of other questions. Nihal Verma joins in. Will markets continue to break records next week? Well, Nihal, you know, that is the big question with regards to what's taking place in the markets, that yes, you know, whether or not that momentum is going to continue into next week. Like I mentioned, there are a couple of cues which are lined up. So for example, the most important cue would probably be what the Fed does on the 13th of December and the run-up of information up to the 13th of December. So for example, we have the jobs data, which is due today, so the street will look at it quite closely. What's happening with the COVID-19 policy when it comes to China, whether or not there would be further tightening, because that would probably slow down the economy, and in a certain way it could possibly be a windfall gain, you know, or a positive gain for Indian markets in the longer run. But going into next week, we do have the Reserve Bank of India, which is meeting as well. Whether or not the quantum of rate hikes will reduce is something that the street would see. What the policy outlook would be will be something that the street will work with as well. Overall, yes, the momentum continues in terms of the overall sentiment for the markets, but the data points from the US, from the globe, would be something that the street would watch closely. Remember that there's a lot of momentum in terms of what is taking place in the economy on an isolated manner as well. That domestic demand is possibly going to fuel a lot of the gains that we're seeing. You've probably even seen it with the entire hotel space as well. And those select pockets of momentum, of consumption continuing, is probably something which is going to bode well for the markets as well. But remember, while we do sing the tunes of record highs, there have been select stocks which have gained and led the market to these record highs. It hasn't been an entire participation which has taken place. So do watch out for select stocks continuing in terms of gains. For example, banking stocks, Adani Enterprises, ITC, Coal India. These have been the big movers for this year, and select specific gains in these stocks will possibly result in the momentum being strong for the markets as well. So just watch out for the macro data. We also have concerns on a larger basis which comes in from the twin deficits for the Indian market. That is something that JP Morgan had pointed out as well, and hence that would be something that the street would work with in terms of a larger perspective as well. Well, Isha Sharma joins in and asks what is happening with Paytm. Well, Paytm, remember, has been quite a disappointment since listing, but they have guided analysts that they could probably break even on going forward. So the management commentary has been quite positive. Whether or not they come through in terms of what they have given in terms of guidance will be something that the street would watch quite closely. Well, on that note, we will wrap up on this market wrap. Thank you very much for joining in. These are a couple of questions which we have taken from a lot of the participants this afternoon. Do keep tuning in every afternoon in terms of a market update, and we'll answer your questions as well, stock specific and market specific. Thanks very much for watching.